Good morning, you guys. So this morning I'm going to be continuing off of our little algebra review. These are things that you've probably already learned and already heard of at some point in time, but we're just going to go back and review this as a refresher. Okay, so in this case, today we're gonna be looking at like radicals and roots and exponents. So something you should know right off the bat is that anytime that you have a number, um, it's gonna look like this. Okay, and whenever you have it as an exponent, so in this case we have 5 squared. Well, let's write that out as if it was expanded. Okay, so 5 squared is going to be the same thing as 5 times 5. Okay, so that's expanded in expanded form. And we know that 5 times 5 is 25. So if you know that, so we know that 5 squared equals 25. Well, what is the square root of 25? Okay, so we're simply just undoing that. So the square root of 25 is going to be 5, because 5 times itself is going to equal 25. So this is just a quick review on radicals and roots and exponents. So we're going to talk about really quickly what happens when you have something like 5 squared, okay, and that's in parentheses, but it has another exponent. So let's say that the other exponent is 2. So what does that mean? Well, we know that when something is squared, so it would mean 5 squared, okay, times 5 squared, right? I'm just doing exactly what we did beforehand, squaring whatever is in parentheses. So that's what happens when we do that, but then we have to expand that out as well. Well, what do we know that 5 squared is? It's 5 times 5. And 5 squared, also 5 times 5. Okay? So essentially, when we expand that out, we're going to have 5 times 5 times 5 times 5. Now, what if I was going to put this into one exponent? What would that be? Well, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. So 5 to the 4th is the same thing as 5 squared squared. So if we were to write a rule for this, it would simply just be this. So a to one exponent in parentheses to another exponent is going to be the same thing as saying like a to the m times n. Notice how in this case we have 5 squared and all of that is squared. So that's the same thing as 5 squared times 2, which would equal 5 to the 4th. So that was just a quick review of that. So I wanted to put that out there. So for example, we have 3, and I'm looking at these examples here. We have 3 cubed, and all of that is cubed. So again, what do? You have to multiply the exponents. So 3 to the 3 times 3 power. And so that is, what is 3 times 3? It's 9. So 3 to the 9th power. So this is simplified for that. Same thing here. 2 squared to the 4th power. Well, what do? We're going to multiply those two things. So 2 times 4, that's going to be 2 to the 8th power. So squaring and taking the square root is going to undo itself. Because if you were taking the square root, you're trying to figure out what number times itself is going to equal that number. In this case, we have the square root of 9 squared. Well, what is the square root of 9? Okay, and you probably said, well, the square root of 9 is 3 because 3 times 3 is 9. Well, what is that squared? What is 3 squared? 9. So squaring a number that is already under a radical is just going to be itself. So the square root of 9 squared equals 9 because 3 squared is going to equal 9. Okay, so always remember that. So let's continue on to another rule that we know about square roots that again should be a refresher for you guys. But we want to recall what a square root is, so what it looks like. And anytime that you have the square root of something, so the square root, let's say, of 4, right? And a lot of times we don't put that 2 there, but we know that if it doesn't have a 2, then it is just a square root symbol. So the square root of 4 is what? Well, it's 2, because 2 times 2 gives us the square, gives us 4. 2 times 2 gives us 4. Okay, but it also can be written this way. So the square root of 4 can also be written as 2 to the 1/2 power. Okay, and that's true for all roots. If it is a square root. Now, if it was something like a cube root, so you would have cube square root of 4. That would be 4 to the 1/3 power. But now, let's think about if it was the cube root of 4 to the 2nd power. Then that would be written as 4 to the 2/3 power. Notice that pattern. It's always going to be true for this. You're going to have n to the square root of m. Y is going to be the same thing as saying y to the m over n exponent. Okay, so that's just one of those rules that we know about radicals and finding rational numbers. So for example, we have a couple of examples down here. 49 to the 1/2 power is going to be the same as the square root of 49. Well, what is the square root of 49? That's 7. So that can be simplified. Okay, what about 1,000? 1,000 to the 1/3 power. That's going to be the cube root of 1,000 to the 1st power. Okay, and the cube root of 1,000 is 10 because 10 times 10 times 10 equals 1,000. Okay, now we have 16 to the 1/2 power equals the square root of 16. Well, the square root of 16 is just 4. So all of those going together. Now let's talk about if it wasn't to the 1st power. What if we had 8 to the 2/3 power? Then that's going to be the cube root, whatever is your denominator, is going to be your root. So denominator, let's write that down. Denominator equals your root. Okay, and your numerator is your exponent. So notice how 3 is the root here, and 2 is the exponent. So it's going to be the cube root of 8, and all of that's going to be squared. Well, the cube root of 8 is, so what number can you multiply the same number 3 times in order to get 8? And that's going to be 2. 2 times 2 times 2 equals 8. So now you're left with 2. And 2 squared is 4. Okay, so those are just a few examples. Now I'm going to do a couple of these down here with you, and then I want you to try some out. So I'm going to do 1 and 5. So number 1 says 100 to the 1/2 power. Well, my denominator, so 2, is going to be my root. So it's going to be the square root of 100 to the first power. We know anything to the first power is just that number. Well, what is the square root of 100? So what times what gives us 100? Okay, you might be saying 10, because 10 times 10 gives you 100. Okay, so that one's solved. Now we're going to consider this one. So again, we remember that oh, sorry, my mistake. It just doesn't want to move for me. The denominator is the root, so 2 is my root, so the square root of 4, and then put that in parentheses because your numerator is going to be your exponent, and our numerator is 3 to the third power. So what is the square root of 4? Square root of 4 is 2, but again, now we have to consider that exponent, and it's 3. And 2 to the third power is 2 times 2 times 2, which is 8. Okay? All right. So I want you to pause this video, and I want you to do 2, 3, 4, and 6, 7, 8. See you guys on the flip side.